Assalamu alaikum students. Today the topic of my lecture is the communication process and what are the elements involved in the process of communication. So let's see what is communication process. The goal of communication is to convey information and the understanding of that information from one person or group to another person or group. This communication process is divided into three basic components. A sender transmits a message through a channel to the receiver. The sender first develops an idea which is composed into a message and then transmitted to the other party who interprets the message and receives the meaning. Information theorists have added somewhat more complicated language, and developing a message is known as encoding, and interpreting the message is referred to as decoding. The study of communication and efforts to develop skills of communication are needed because communication is absolutely necessary for business. And there is no one who doesn't have to engage in some kind of business activity. Persons in all professions need to cultivate skills as needed for their work. And there is no one who doesn't have to engage in some kind of business activity. Persons in all professions need to cultivate skills as needed for their work. Doctors, engineers, chartered accountants, actors, and others in the entertainment industry, managers of all kinds of organizations, educators, besides persons engaged in business enterprises, have to engage daily in some kind of business communication. In order to analyze the activity of communication, we must know the process and the elements involved in the process of communication. So let's see what are these elements or components of communication. There are 6 fundamental elements of communication, and these are context, sender, that is called encoder of the message, and third one is message, fourth is medium, fifth one is receiver or decoder, and the sixth one is feedback. So there are 6 elements in the process of communication. So in this figure you can see the whole process of communication. First of all, sender encodes the message through a channel or a medium to the receiver, and then feedback is given through a proper channel. So let's discuss all these elements one by one. The first element is called context. Context may well be called any specific setting that works as a stimulus and rouses a person to take an action. It plays a very vital role in how a message is encoded and decoded. The same message may have a quite different meaning depending on the situation. Whether we communicate orally or in written form, every message begins with context. The stimulus may be internal or external. Number 2, sender or encoder. Sender is also called encoder. A person who starts or initiates the process of communication is normally referred to as the sender. From his personal data bank, he selects ideas, encodes, and finally transmits them to the receiver. The entire burden of communication rests upon the sender or encoder. His choice of words and images and the combinations of two is what makes the receiver listen carefully. The sender should also decide first what specific outcomes he wants from communication. This will help you to choose appropriate language. Now, what are the external stimuli and internal stimuli while drafting any message? External stimulus may include a letter, a memo, telephone call, etc. And some external factors make the sender start communication and function as stimuli. And the internal stimulus includes sender's own idea, observation, thought, urge, experience, etc. The most important thing is to understand and analyze the receiver's needs, culture, and attitude in order to make message effective. All these aspects of context must be understood. The third element in the process of communication is called message, and it is the encoded idea that is transmitted by the sender to receiver. The formulation of the message is very important because an incorrect patterning can turn the receiver hostile or make him lose interest. At this very stage, the sender has to be extremely cautious. No message can achieve its goals unless it has unity of thoughts, simple language, consistency in expression, and emphasis on main point. So, for drafting any message, the sender should keep in mind the unity of thoughts, simple language, consistency in expression, and emphasis on main points. Whether the message may be oral or written, the sender must be very much clear about this message and its contents. The sender must design his message in view of the receiver. And the fourth element in the process of communication is medium. It could be oral, written, or non-verbal. Prior to the composition of the message, the medium should be decided. For example, in oral communication, one can afford to be a little informal, but in written communication, all rules of communication need to be observed. We may say that each medium follows its own set of rules and regulations. The medium chosen for communicating any message will depend on various factors such as cost, urgency, confidentiality, and influence. Written media used inside an organization may be memos, letters, fax, etc. Oral communication with an organization may take place in the form of meetings, presentations, interviews, etc. And external written and oral communication may be reports, letters, group presentations, teleconferences, advertisements in newspapers, commercials on TV, etc. In the process of communication, fifth element is called receiver or decoder. It means the receiver is the person who receives the message sent by the sender is called the receiver. He attempts to decode the message, that is why he may be called the decoder. If the goal of the sender is envisioned as similar to his own, the listener becomes more receptive. For the decoding of the message is done in almost the same terms as were indicated by the sender. The receiver must consider carefully the tone used in the message so that the correct message is received. He should also give the attention to every message which that deserves. The last element in the process of communication is called feedback, and this is the most important element of communication. Actually, effective communication takes place only when there is feedback. The errors and flaws that around in business situations are a result of lack of communication. Feedback can be oral or written, in action or silence, depending upon the situation or the choice of the receiver. We may say that it's the part of communication that completes the entire loop. A good strategy for giving feedback is to follow the following steps. Read or listen to what the sender is trying to communicate. Repeat the crux of the message to ensure that your intention has been rightly understood. There are two models of communication. One is called one-way communication process model. So you can see in this figure, it is called one-way communication process because here the message is drafted and then through a medium, and then it is received, and then it is decoded. But here you can see that there is no feedback in this process of communication, so that's why it is called one-way communication process. You can see here the two-way communication process. Here you can see that when the feedback is received from the by the receiver of the message, when he receives the message from the sender of the message, it is called two-way communication process.